On June 11th, 1988, at the St Barnabas Medical Center burn unit in Livingston, New Jersey, a man by the name of John W. Yingo Sr., who was a 72-year-old retired municipal court judge, was administered into the hospital because he had suffered from an allergic reaction to the sun triggered by his blood-thinning medication. This is when he was asleep in his hospital room and someone snuck in and injected him with lidocaine, causing his heart to stop. Little did anyone know this was the beginning of a 16-year medical murder spree that rocked New Jersey and Pennsylvania to its core. It left 29 confirmed dead, but many claims of as many as 400 people murdered. Welcome to Dredge a Reality, where we talk about crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories we've dredged from reality. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notification, and the like button so you don't miss any content we've dredged up for you. Now let's get to digging. After Yingo Sr. died under mysterious circumstances in 1988, there were more mysterious deaths happening at St Barnabas, throwing up red flags. This included an AIDS patient that died because they were purposely given an overdose of insulin, along with at least 9 other mysterious deaths. In January of 1992, hospital investigators at St Barnabas discovered contaminated IV bags in an IV bag storage closet. This discovery stemmed from many patients dying under mysterious circumstances, mainly after given an IV, so they launched an investigation. 1 month later, in February of 1992, a male nurse walks into Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and applies for a job. Due to a nurse shortage and privacy laws in the United States at the time, he was hired without a background check right away. Shortly after he was hired, 3 elderly women died under mysterious circumstances with an overdose of a heart medication, digoxin. Not too long after, an elderly woman named Helen Dean was sleeping in her bed and was awoken with the sting of a hypodermic needle jabbing into her arm. She opens her eyes and sees a male nurse injecting her with an unknown substance, causing her to die a short while later. Before she dies, she tells hospital staff and her family that a sneaky male nurse did it. Her statements went unheard and not taken seriously. The following year, in 1993, the same man that was hired at Warren Hospital the prior year got a divorce from his wife. He wanted to quit nursing around the same time, but had to continue to work because court-ordered child support made him obligated to do so. The same year as his divorce, he started stalking a female coworker of his, even going as far as to breaking into the woman's home while her and her son were asleep. He ended up leaving without waking them. Soon after, the female coworker filed a police report against the man. The man pleaded guilty to stalking and received 1 year probation. In September of 1993, a 91-year-old cancer patient at Warren Hospital said a man that wasn't her nurse came into her room and injected her with something. She died the very next day. The woman's son pleaded that his mother's death wasn't natural. So the hospital administered a lie detector test on the man that was hired a year before and other nurses. They all passed, and then he was still allowed to continue to work at the hospital until he left in the spring of 1994. The man then moved to Hunterdon Medical Center in Flemington, New Jersey. Everything was smooth for the first 2 years. Then in 1996, at least 5 people died under mysterious circumstances due to an overdose of digoxin at the medical center. After his 3-year stint at Hunterdon Medical Center, he decided to move to Morristown Memorial Hospital in Morristown, New Jersey. He was fired shortly after due to poor work performance. He was then unemployed for 6 months, causing him to get behind on child support. Then in February of 1998, the man was hired at Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation in Allentown, Pennsylvania. But he didn't last long because by October 1998, he was blamed for giving drugs to patients at unscheduled times. He was also seen going into a room of a patient that wasn't his with multiple syringes. He was then fired. The woman survived the encounter but had a broken arm. No one was sure exactly what happened in that room. The man bounced around to different hospitals for the next 4 years, always followed by shady and mysterious deaths. Then in late 2002, the man walks into Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey for his new job and introduces himself to his new co-workers. His name was Charles Cullen, a man with over 15 years of experience as a medical professional, a man that has served his country in the United States Navy, a man with a perfect-looking resume, but really a man with a dark secret. A brief history on Charles Cullen. He was born in West Orange, New Jersey on February 22, 1960 to Edmund and Florence Cullen, a devoted Catholic family with 8 children, with Charles being the youngest. His childhood was full of tragedy and death, with his father Edmund dying when he was only 7 months old. Charles later said he had a miserable childhood, constantly getting bullied and beat up by his sister's boyfriend. When he was 9 years old, he drank chemicals from his chemistry set, attempting to commit suicide. He lived through the ordeal, and his miserable childhood continued. On December 6, 1977, when Charles was 17 years old, his mother Florence was killed in a car accident. Charles was a senior in high school at the time. Charles claims the death was devastating and claims the hospital didn't notify him immediately and cremated his mother's body instead of returning it. Finding himself an orphan, he dropped out of high school and joined the United States Navy. He served on the USS Woodrow Wilson submarine. He passed basic training and psychological exams, having no signs of mental instability at the time. He eventually ranked up to Petty Officer Second Class, part of the team that operated the vessel's Poseidon missiles. Many people that knew Charles at the time said he was a quiet loner and a little erratic. He struggled in many social situations. He was even bullied and hazed by fellow crew members. This, along with crippling depression, caused Charles to once again attempt to take his own life and further his mental decline. A year after he was appointed to Petty Officer Second Class, Charles's leading petty officer discovered him sitting in missile controls, wearing a surgical mask, gloves, and scrubs instead of his uniform. Charles was punished, but never explained what he was doing. Charles was eventually reassigned to a lower pressure job on a supply ship called USS Canopus. He then attempted suicide yet again and was committed to the Navy psychiatric ward like he had been many times before. Due to Charles's odd behavior and developing mental health struggles, he was medically discharged from the Navy in 1984. Shortly after, he enrolled in Mountainside Hospital's nursing school in Montclair, New Jersey. He ended up becoming president of the nursing class and graduated in 1986. Later that year, he applied for a job at, you guessed it, St Barnabas Medical Center burn unit in Livingston, New Jersey. Charles then met a woman named Adriana Baum and married her in 1987, having 2 daughters together. Adriana started becoming very uncomfortable with her new husband's disturbing behavior, drinking problems, and abuse towards their 2 Yorkshire Terriers. She said she was awoken by the screams of her 2 dogs. He would be in the basement training them and beating them if they didn't listen to him. She also claimed that he once put one of the dogs in a bowling bag and zipped it up. Meanwhile, in his work life, he had been working at his job at St Barnabas Medical Center for about 2 years, when on the night of June 11, 1988, he decided to act out on his psychopathic tendencies. This is when Charles prepared a syringe with lidocaine, injecting it into an IV bag. He then walked down the hospital hallway and entered the room of John W. Yingo Sr. and injected him with the lidocaine, stopping his heart. This was his first victim of a 16-year medical murder spree. He was also the man responsible for injecting the AIDS patient with an overdose of insulin. After this door was opened, he continued to get more and more comfortable with acting on these psychotic urges. Charles would mainly do this by injecting deadly doses of these drugs into saline IV fluid bags. He would then put them at random in medical supply closets, causing an unwanted, morbid game of Russian roulette. Other nurses would then pick the bags unknowingly and poison a patient. The exact number of patients directly killed by Charles at St Barnabas is unknown, but he admitted to several murders and undoubtedly caused more due to the tainted IV bags. But by January 1992, hospital authorities had found out about the tainted IV bags and launched an investigation. Charles left St Barnabas around the time they started investigating. Investigators determined that Charles was more than likely the person responsible for the tainted bags. They also were sure he was responsible for dozens of deaths, but didn't call authorities due to lack of evidence and not wanting wrongful death lawsuits. This is when Charles was hired by Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where he killed 3 elderly women with the digoxin, and he was the sneaky male nurse the elderly lady told staff and family about. In 1993, Charles's wife Adriana filed for divorce and for a restraining order against him. She was afraid of him endangering her and her children. She even claimed Charles spiked people's drinks with lighter fluid and insisted that he was mentally ill. This is when he wanted to quit nursing, but his court-ordered child support forced him to work. Shortly after is when he started stalking that co-worker and was arrested and made another attempt. Charles then took 2 months off work to be treated for depression, but when he returned to work at Warren Hospital, this is when he injected the 91-year-old cancer patient with medication, and she told staff that he did it. The hospital gives him a lie detector test, he passes, and he continues to work until the next spring. Charles then did a stint at Hunterton Medical Center where he murdered 5 people by injecting them with overdoses of digoxin. Fast forward to 1998, he was working at Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Pennsylvania. This is when he was seen entering a hospital patient's room with syringes and leaving the patient with a broken arm. Continuing jumping around to different hospitals, he ended up at Easton Hospital in Pennsylvania. This is where he murdered yet another patient, with the coroner finding lethal amounts of digoxin in the patient's blood. The hospital did an investigation and decided they did not have enough evidence to point to Charles being the murderer. Then for the rest of the 1990s, he jumped from hospital to hospital, continuing his killing spree, almost getting caught several times. The hospitals usually just chalked it up to not having enough evidence and just letting him go, and him still getting jobs due to the nation's nurse shortage. On January 11th, 2000, he tried to kill himself again by lighting a charcoal grill in his bathtub, attempting carbon monoxide poisoning. His neighbors reported it because of seeing smoke. He was taken to a psychiatric facility but sent home the next day. Charles was suspected of murdering patients while working at St. Luke's Hospital in Pennsylvania by his co-workers. They found medication vials in a disposable bin, which was odd because these particular drugs weren't used recreationally and had no value outside of the hospital, so to steal these was unusual. The investigation proved that Charles was responsible for the theft. In June of 2002, the hospital gave him the option to resign or he would be fired. He decided he would resign and was escorted out by security. 7 of his co-workers from St. Luke's Hospital contacted the Lehigh District Attorney, pleading that they investigate Charles because they think he's been killing patients with drugs. They never looked into him and dropped everything for lack of evidence. This is when in September 2002, Charles Cullen accepted the job at Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey, and things started to be truly exposed. Charles got too comfortable and killed at least 13 patients by 2003. Somerset Hospital started taking notice of Charles's suspicious behavior. He would access records and go into rooms of patients that weren't his. He would also try to request medications that patients weren't prescribed. In July of 2003, the hospital was warned about suspicious overdoses that were indicating that an employee is killing patients. This was from the New Jersey Poison Information and Education System. After this warning, he killed at least 5 more patients. Charles's final killing was an insulin killing, resulting in the patient dying of low blood sugar. This happened in October of 2003 and was so suspicious it prompted the hospital to call the New Jersey State Police. State officials reprimanded the hospital for not reporting a non-fatal insulin overdose administered by Charles back in August of 2003. Even though things were definitely fishy, police didn't have quite enough evidence to make an arrest. Meanwhile, the hospital looked into Charles's employment history, finding other reports of him suspiciously surrounding patients' deaths. They fired him on October 31st, 2003. A nurse at Somerset Hospital named Amy Loughran, who was friendly with Charles at work, also contacted authorities when she grew suspicious of his actions. Police put a wire on her and kept him under surveillance for several weeks. even getting Amy to visit Charles outside of work. With this evidence, police had enough probable cause to make an arrest. Charles was arrested on December 12, 2003 while eating at a restaurant. He was charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Charles worked out a plea where he promised to cooperate with authorities if they didn't seek the death penalty. Charles then admitted to killing more than 40 patients over a span of 16 years and at 10 different hospitals, all of which just let him go without calling the police except for Somerset. The hospitals were attempting to avoid a class action wrongful death lawsuit, but caused a mass murderer to continue his spree. Charles worked with a lot of terminally ill patients and claims he killed the victims out of sympathy to prevent them from dying in front of everyone and nurses dehumanizing them. But not all of the patients were terminal, and he randomly put contaminated IV bags in medical closets. This disproves that argument. Charles claims that his brain was in a fog and he blacked out a lot of times, so he couldn't remember all the patients he killed and the reasons why he did it. Yet another contradiction to his first theory of knowing exactly why he was doing it. In November of 2004, Charles pleaded guilty in an Allentown, Pennsylvania court to killing 6 patients and trying to kill 3 others. He had to be gagged and restrained because he kept chanting, "Your Honor, you need to step down." He was held in jail awaiting sentencing, and on March 2, 2006, at his court hearing in New Jersey, he was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole until June 10, 2403. On March 10, 2006, Charles was brought back to Pennsylvania for his charges there and continued to chant, "Your Honor, you need to step down," repeatedly, just like his court appearance a year and a half earlier. The judge then handed down an additional 6 life sentences. Charles is currently serving his time at New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, New Jersey, and will end up spending the rest of his life there. That covers the horrific story of a serial killer who preyed on some of the most vulnerable victims for over 16 years and at 10 different hospitals. Thanks so much for watching, and please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any reality we've dredged up for you. I'll see you next time with some more crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories dredged from reality.